We are?
Yeah.
And you're starting us off today? Or do you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay. But you'll start off the conversation. All right, so.
You're great.
Hi everyone, how's it going? I'm Bonnie Violet, trans, femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, and digital chaplain. I know that's a long one. Welcome to Transjoyboise, the podcast where we celebrate the vibrant stories, resilience, and connections of Boise's trans community. Through heartfelt conversations, uplifting narratives, and shared experiences, we explore the many ways trans joy thrives despite our challenges. And this is my lovely co-host.
I'm Pacey. I'm a trans masc, non-binary, mental health and recovery advocate.
Nice.
It's a lot too.
Great.
Yeah.
And don't mind my reading stuff for now. We'll get there.
It's a lot to memorize.
I'm all do.
No, it's really good.
All right, so what? I'm excited. This is your show today.
Oh Lord. All right. So the inauguration is just days away, and we have seen already what the agenda is with this incoming administration, and it's not great so far. I think, a lot of people thought, and we've all heard the argument that, Trump doesn't actually care about the LGBTQ plus community. He's just saying these things to win the election. And, I know I've heard that a lot from like right-leaning friends or family members. It's just like, oh, it's not a big deal. You're overreacting. And by now, I think it is fairly evident that is just not the case.
It's pretty clear. Yeah, I feel like I'm one that kind of stays a little away from things, and I might have been that girl that I'm like, he was just saying stuff, but it's really coming into play, and it's scary.
Yeah, it's a sad kind of like, well, I fucking told you, because we don't ever want to have to say that over something so serious, but it is a dumpster fire right now.
Yeah.
So they, just Idaho's legislation kicked off the year with their first motion, which was to overturn same-sex marriage.
Right.
Which is just the thing that they found to be of utmost importance in 2025. The one thing that they needed to address.
Number one on the docket.
Yeah, and it's just like, that's fucking ridiculous.
And it's to try to get SCOTUS to make it to where each state can decide, correct?
Yes. Yeah, so they want to, if this resolution is approved, it will go to the Supreme Court, just like it did in 2015. And the whole argument that we've been seeing so far in the last few months with the cases that are going to the Supreme Court is it's all coming down to states' rights. So in this case, it's the state should have the right to decide and regulate marriage and what quantifies as a legal marriage.
Gotcha.
And, with the Scarametti case, it was the states should have the right to decide what is healthy for trans youth, or just for youth in general, not the parents. And it's interesting that has always been the argument. Well, no, it wasn't about racism. It wasn't about slavery. It was about states' rights. It's the same fucking thing. They just change it a little bit in an attempt to maybe not seem like bigots. Right. So
I wonder how that's going for them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, already with this motion for the same-sex marriages, they're already saying, well, this really doesn't have anything to do with same-sex marriages. It has more to do with states' rights. Yeah. So they're already skirting the issue in a way that, the people that are in that party can just, parrot and be like, well, no, it's not about that.
And was this wasn't something that was talked about really in election, during the election process and stuff, right? I didn't hear a lot of people talking about how they were going to attack trans people, but not not gay and lesbian folks when it comes to same-sex marriage.
Yeah, I think that was deliberate because they still were.
Well, more of our larger LGBTQ community would have probably showed up more.
Exactly.
Because that was one of the things I was talking with Callie G over in Pocatello last night, and she was like, all these people now are wanting to get involved and wanting to do shit, but it was like, where were you when it was time to vote, or where were you when we were, and I'm just as guilty. I did end up voting the last minute, but I think I too was kind of in this delusional idea that somehow it wasn't really going to happen, and didn't really understand the fullness of how it would all play out. And so I'm definitely feeling that, but it seems like there was even more folks.
Oh yeah. Well, because it seemed almost cartoonish. The
Yeah.
way, if we were to look at what's happening now, like 6 months ago, you would have been like, there's no way. Like, that's ridiculous. That seems like you're reading the fucking Handmaid's Tale or something.
Right.
But the people that were really paying attention and noticing these signs were terrified. And I think that it was very deliberate on Trump's campaign's team, like their plan, their strategy, because if they were open about their plan to target the entire community, they wouldn't have had people, because there were still like a decent amount of people in our community that voted for him.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
You know, and it's like that trope that it's like, well, I didn't say anything when they went through for them, and now they're coming for me, and there's no one to. And it's like, well, what did you expect to happen? You know.
Yeah.
So it's just the same as like right after, it was just days after Trump was elected, if you would Google how, like, the people that wanted to change their vote, they were searching, how do I change my vote? Like, you can actually go back and change your fucking vote. And it was when they started learning about like tariffs and these things. And I think that it was intentional on Trump's behalf, you know, to just be very vague about these things and wait until it was too late.
Right. Well, and here in Idaho, they also wanted this. I think the second thing on the docket was around like congratulating BSU for pulling out of the volleyball tournament because of an alleged trans athlete, right?
Well, it was, so that happened a couple months ago, and BSU forfeited the game. I believe it was to Utah, and because there was a trans volleyball player.
Right.
And the thing is, BSU played that same team last year and beat them. So like, it's not like there was a skill issue where they're like, it's not fair because we're just never going to be able to play against someone who's obviously got the upper hand. You fucking beat them. It's not about that.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, the motion was to commend BSU for doing that, because they're trying to talk about this in a way that prioritizes Title IX, but not for trans people. Because last year, I believe in April, they added a lot of queer protections to Title IX for like gender issues that, you know, you can't discriminate against those things. But now they're saying that it's mainly for women, you know, for the equality for women in sports. And you know, not trans women.
Yeah.
So that's really gross.
Yeah. And so do we know what, because I mean, there's so many things that are happening right now locally as well as the national level. And I know from my understanding is there's going to be a lot of issues locally around like Medicaid, access to Medicaid, immigration issues, reproductive rights. Sounds like there might actually be some possibility for things to get a little better, but not enough in the reproductive area, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, it's, I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah.
I think that,
well, it seemed like it was like splitting hairs. So it was like maybe like one more little thing, like one less harmful thing, but it was still at the end of the day not enough.
Yeah, well, they're starting to come down on those things too, because there was a case in Texas that is also going to the Supreme Court about pornography. And so adult content sites needed to provide documentation for like age verification. But it wasn't just the like, oh, click here if you're 18. It was like upload a copy of your driver's license, that kind of thing. So it's going to the Supreme Court to decide if that's constitutional or not. And because it's an infringement, you know, of rights. But that is kind of opening the door for people to decide what qualifies as pornographic.
Yeah, because that was kind of like the big thing with obscene when it came to like drag queens and that sort of thing. There was this idea of determining what is obscene and what is not. And my understanding and hearing you talk in the past, it's like just by being visibly queer or trans, that's porn in some form or fashion. And so if that was considered porn or obscene, then that would kind of begin to eliminate our visibility in public spaces.
Yeah, it's in Project 2025, that mess of a document, that they, you know, they're not shy about equating being trans in being inherently pornographic.
Right.
So if they are able to set legal precedent with the Supreme Court for what is considered pornography,
Right.
and then they deem, trans people
Which
as
isn't even sexuality, it's
Right.
gender.
Exactly.
Like, but people, I know they don't understand
Mm.
that there's
Yeah.
a difference.
But if they do that, this could censor not only trans people, but just other people in the queer community,
Yeah.
because their very existence will be deemed pornographic, even if like the content that they share isn't explicit in any way.
Right. Well, and you might not even have to be gay or lesbian or trans, but if you're perceived to be, then that would be considered obscene.
Exactly.
Which I think is something more and more people are starting to realize, because gender nonconformity isn't only just left to those who say I'm gender nonconforming or I'm non-binary.
Right.
There are a lot of men and cisgendered men and women who, by all intents and purposes, you would see them and say, oh, that's a non-binary person. I think they use they them pronouns, but they don't. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting. Well, not interesting, but I don't think people. It just seems like it's such a huge pool, and it would really begin to censor what people look like in the public
Exactly.
in a very rigid way for all people.
Yeah. I mean, I know that was a big concern last year and the last couple years, especially here in Idaho, when they were going after drag. And I think that, that was inherently a very transphobic thing. They were going for trans people and just calling it that. But again, it was kind of a distraction, because they had this thing that had some keywords that people were like, oh, they're going to ban drag, and they were keeping all of our attention with this, and then while we were focused on that, they slid some anti-trans legislation
Right.
through. And I think that is going to be happening again this year, most likely, is banning drag and things like that, which is going to, like you said, bleed into not only like drag performances, but everyday life.
Yeah.
This is a person that is wearing the opposite gender's clothing,
right?
And that is pornographic and that is illegal. It's just this. It's fucking unbelievable.
Yeah.
But it's something that we aren't just imagining anymore. Like, people can't say, "Oh, you're overreacting." We're not overreacting. This is happening right now. Like these were the first motions in the legislation in Idaho for 2025. It's just the first two. I mean, there's no question that we're under attack.
Right, and I think there's more that's going to be unfolding here in Idaho, but with the inauguration just being days away, can you speak a little bit specifically to maybe what Trump has said is going to happen, or what we're most concerned about?
Well, Trump has said on day one, he is going to end the transgender lunacy. So, on day one.
Right.
So, what he has said that will look like is ending gender-affirming care for youth, banning transgender athletes from competing in sports, and removing any trans personnel from the military.
Gotcha.
Day one.
Right, and I thought I saw something about not allowing like transgender people to use a restroom in any public facility. Is that related to this, or is this something
That's
different?
also going to the Supreme Court, I believe.
Okay.
And that's
at a federal level, not a local level, even though it's probably gonna.
Yeah, it starts locally, but then once it goes to the Supreme Court, then it gets hairy, because then anyone can kind of decide that it's terrifying.
Yeah. So if Trump does that the first day, how long till it actually really comes into play, or are there other things that could get in the slow it down or
I think
potentially
so,
stop it?
Yeah, because I know that there are already lawsuits, and we've seen firsthand how long the litigation can take. We had the event for the Scrimeti case, and that happened on December 3rd, and we're not going to hear anything about that
June
until
or
June or July.
Yeah.
So I think that there are going to be a lot of people that are going to try and tie that up as much as possible. So, but that's really not. I'm not sure. We're going to have to just kind of wait and see.
And then it's just whether or not, because in some situations I know, there's ways that you can get because there's a hearing coming, that the law doesn't come into effect yet. Whereas in other situations, the law comes into effect and then the hearing happens later. And so it's really still to be determined when it might actually like roll out and begin to impact our day to day.
Totally. And you never know what he's actually going to do with what he says, because of course he said these things while he was campaigning.
Yeah, but he's also has like a Republican Senate and a Republican House of Representatives, right? So he has all of the like all of the kind of things that could keep him in check, so to speak, are not there.
Yeah, and
or they're more likely to go along with him.
Right. And historically that does not go well.
Yeah.
Usually.
Well, and when was the last time that happened in the U.S. where all three were the same party?
It has. I don't remember exactly when it was.
Yeah.
We'd have to look into that.
Yeah.
But I am horrified for this. Like, he has also said that he wants to bring back like a "don't say gay" thing, so that would likely be happening.
Yeah.
Which
is all into that same crap. It's all so connected. It's basically like turning everything you hear about Florida happening across the whole United States.
Exactly. Yeah. And he's made it clear that his administration is only going to recognize two genders.
And sex at birth.
And
is that even a gender? Because I know like in Idaho they like completely removed gender as like an identifier.
I'm sure that it will be like that, because it's like they're only going to recognize male and female. And at first I was like, okay, but it's the sex you were
assigned at birth. Yeah.
So even if you have, your
gender marker changed, your name changed, you present yourself in a way that is quote unquote passing,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and then that will, affect the bathroom laws and stuff like that. So even if someone completely passes 100%, if someone told on you, and you can get sued if that does, pass for the rest of the country, you can get sued for starting at like $5,000.
Yeah.
$10,000, I think. Yeah. So it's.
So what do we do about this, or like how do we?
That's the thing.
Deal or cope, or I don't know. Like, what do we do with this?
It's terrible because it's so pervasive. It's every time I look at my phone, there's something else to be, horrified about.
Yeah.
And
because you have like the social media that's jumping on the bandwagon. They're gonna stop protecting us as well. With Facebook, were you saying something about that?
Yeah, it's a Meta, so it's Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. So Mark Zuckerberg released a video that he's like, we need to talk about some serious things, and it's just him talking to the camera for a long time. And essentially, they're removing protections for the queer community. So they're removing fact checkers, they're making it so how there are keywords and things that you can't say because you'll get banned.
It's already pretty hostile for us on social media.
Yeah.
I mean, just a queer kid on social media can get called all kinds of names and told how mentally ill they are and all these sorts of things without, like, just by being a young person on social media. So I can't imagine it. Those are with protections. What it's going to look like beyond that.
Yeah, and it's very targeted. They're removing the protections for the LGBTQ community, and it's gonna be terrible. And
is there my assumption is, and I don't know, because the intersectionality with things, I know like a lot of when we talked about like the DEI stuff and like a lot of things have kind of been centered around like racial aspects as well too. Does that seem? Will those protections still be there on social media and stuff, or are those beginning to get chipped away as well? Because it seems like a lot of this stuff is getting lumped into the same sort of like movement, if you will.
It could be. I'm really not sure on that. I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Yeah.
Because what we saw with like the DEI centers is they were almost trying to turn marginalized communities against each other. So. Well, that's a really good question.
It's to be determined. But yeah.
And another thing they're doing is they're moving a lot of their offices from California to Texas in an attempt to not be as biased. So
biased from Californians, but instead be biased to Texans.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because if you're concerned about bias impacting you because you're in California, then. Because you could still not be biased and be in the place if you carried yourself that way.
Exactly.
But there are a lot of regulations. There are a lot of like things that do kind of limit what you can do. And I know like places like California and stuff like that, it's a lot more regulated in some ways, but also like yeah.
And you have to look at like, well, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
So how are you being biased by the state that you're in?
Mm-hmm.
So look at how different California is from Texas.
Yeah.
If you look at the maps of the United States and they're color coded with how dangerous they are for trans people,
Mm-hmm.
Texas and Florida are the fucking worst. You
Right.
can be there. They're basically saying like, don't even travel here
Mm-hmm.
if you're trans because it's that dangerous.
Right.
And California is a sanctuary state.
Yeah.
Basically, like if you're trans and you need to be somewhere safe, go to California.
Get the fuck to California.
That's the bias
Mm-hmm.
that they are trying to avoid. And so
Yeah.
it's very clear what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess are those both ends of the Gulf of America?
Yeah, right.
Sorry, that's probably a little derailment, but I think that goes to lend to like there's all the issues around like yes, it's LGBTQ folks, yes, it's trans people, but it's also like centered around immigration and racism and sexism and like all this sort of stuff is just like it's all wrapped up in one not so cute package.
Oh yeah, we are hardly the only demographic that's being
I just
targeted.
can't believe that there are so many people that are in that mindset that they could having enough power to really persuade like what's happening across the whole country. I think that's the thing that still baffles me because I can get behind the fact, yeah, there's some people that are ignorant to some degree. There are some people that are just downright awful and horrible to people. But like most people or a strong enough minority of people, like that to me I think is still really hard to comprehend. And I think that's might have been where a lot of people have been in their inaction or their like complacency, if you will, is like, yeah, okay, there's some assholes out there, there's some people that are this way, but are they really gonna cause something on a big scale? I don't know.
I think a lot of people were misled.
Yeah.
So I've been seeing so many articles and cases of people who voted for Trump, were big Trump supporters, but now members of their family are being deported, or they themselves are at risk of being deported, or they're going to lose their life-saving health care.
Right.
You know, because they're like, oh, well, I'm on Obamacare, and that's, so what do I do? And they're feeling personally betrayed by Trump, but it's like, unfortunately, you weren't paying attention.
And everything's already going to come into place, and it's going to take a certain amount of time before we can really fix all that shit. Even if people were like, oh my gosh, and decided to do something, it's kind of late.
Yeah, it is. It's, unfortunately, we fucked around, and now we're finding out.
Yeah. So, this is pretty doom and gloom, and all of that, which is real. How do we in Boise, Idaho, how do we deal with that? Like, what would you suggest or we do?
Yeah.
Like, for what can we do?
It's hard because there's this anger, but the thing that kind of compounds that and makes it worse is the helplessness. You know, because in so many instances when you feel a lot of anger, there's something that you can do. You can start taking steps to rectify it. But a lot of this is completely out of our control. So what I try to do is look to the things in my life that I can control. You know, I can control the way that I spend my day. I can stay healthy. I can I can control the outlets that I have. I can, you know, there are these things that I can focus on, that I can control, but it's really difficult. And a lot of people, I think, don't even necessarily realize how angry they are until they realize that, like, maybe they...
Well, and at some point, you're going to probably get numb or avoidant when it comes to all this sort of stuff. And so I think part of that is that balance of, because I know you're a lot more into this on the regular than, say, like I am. And part of that has to do with my consumption of it really fucks with my spirit and my, like, attitude and the way I feel about being in the world. And like I know that that's something that I think we all have to be a little bit mindful of, but I also am realizing more and more that I can't just like can't ignore it.
Right.
It isn't wise for me to just completely ignore it, because there's certain information and maybe certain strategies and things that I need to do in order to better like set myself up to begin to deal with this stuff as it comes at me, because they're probably because I've been like, those are the only ways I'm going to know like what I need to do, because right now it's just about harm reduction.
Right.
Like what's something I can do to reduce the likelihood of this, that, or the other, knowing that still all this other crap is going to impact me in some way. So it seems like being mindful of consumption, one, make sure you are consuming information about what is happening politically and locally as well as nationally, but being mindful about like how much that is, how much you take in, how you take it in. But I think also is like, what do you do with that? So I think part of it too is being able to have conversations with other people, so it doesn't just stick inside of us, you know. So being able to talk with other trans and non-binary folks, or others who really can listen and hear to kind of like where you're at, and maybe even reflect back that they're having a similar experience, so that we don't feel so isolated in what we're going through. I mean, I think that seems like a great way to, I guess, begin to kind of cope with and move forward, as it's only going to continue and it may actually get worse. And so it's like, we need to really, I think, and that's why I think Transjoy Boise and the work that we're trying to do in the community is really hopefully trying to create those outlets and touch points where we can not be alone and isolated in what we're going through. Because that's a lot of what this is like, right? Separate and, what is it, divide and conquer. And so it's really even more and more important that we find ways to connect.
Yeah, I agree. I think my advice would be to be aware of how much you can handle when it comes to what you're consuming, because while it is very important to be informed, it's also so easy to just be completely bogged down by this because it's so depressing. And then do things physically to get some of the anger out, like work out, go for a run, maybe go to a rage room, something like that, but maintain like a healthy lifestyle, because if you leave it all inside, it's just gonna fucking manifest as sickness, all sorts of things. And surround yourself with people that care about it and care about you, because I know for some people in my life, they try and talk to their friends about this, and their friends kind of leave them with the feeling of, you're overreacting.
Right.
And it's like, so now not only is this person having to deal with all of these injustices in their life, they have to justify how they're feeling with their reactions to their friends and loved ones. And I think that that's fucking ridiculous.
And you do that often enough, you're just gonna stop, you know, and it's gaslighting. So that's why I think it's really important for us to find either trans and non-binary folks or allies who can really be like, yeah, this is, because I mean, I've had people say like, oh, it's got to be hard to be trans and non-binary right now, and they like can recognize that it's hard, but they don't necessarily understand exactly what's going on.
Exactly.
So there are folks that I don't think they have to understand the depth of what we're going through, but they can at least notice or acknowledge the fact that things got to be a little scary for many of us right now.
Yeah, and right now, it's difficult to, like my partner said this last night, we were talking about it, and they said, right now, you can't be an ally and not an activist.
Yeah.
And we kind of got into a conversation about how if you're not siding with anyone right now, you're siding with the oppressors.
Yeah.
And being quiet right now just isn't an option if you're an ally. If you're truly an ally and you want to help, you need to advocate for us.
Yeah. I'm actually, I'm preaching this Sunday in a Christian church of all things.
Oh, wow.
And part of it is like, how can Christians be there for trans and non-binary folks? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've been kind of like wrestling around with that a little bit, but how best can people be allies? And one of the things that I'm leaning onto is this idea that Maya Angelou always talked about how she says, I bring every kind person I've ever met with me wherever I go. And I think that's probably like the easiest and most powerful thing that an ally can do with us is to bring us in the room. Bring us in the conversations when we're talked about, to talk about us in positive and good ways, you know. That I think that's because like I think we even talked about this in a previous episode where you were talking about how like they almost have more power in this dynamic than we do.
Oh yeah.
And that we need them to leverage their power, because they're going to be able to convince people who are not trans and non-binary more likely, you know what I mean? Like, you spoke about it so much better than
absolutely.
I did.
I think that's absolutely true, because I love that quote.
I love my
whole idea. Yeah. But I think that particularly I was speaking about cis men and like cis straight men, right? But it goes for anybody. It could be, you know, people that attend a church. It could be any group of people. And if one of their peers who is like them, you know, cis whatever, challenges the negative things that they're saying, or they're challenging the stereotypes that they hear, it's more likely to be received than if someone were to hear it from us.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So I ask all of my allies that I'm friends with to challenge the negative things that they're hearing about us, because it's going to carry more weight than if it comes from me.
Yep.
You know, and I think, you know, I was talking to my partner last night, and they had the same question. They're just like, what do we do? What can I do? I'm so mad. Yeah. And they're a wonderful artist, so I was like, channel this into your art. You know, there are so many things that we need to be talking about right now, that we need to be bringing attention to, and a lot of times the only way people will listen is if it's through art.
Yeah, some sort of aesthetic way of, you know, spending time with it, or even, I think sometimes I think one thing about artists that's really great is I think they really get it. They have a sensitivity and an understanding about the subject that I think many of us are so removed or callous to that we can't really feel it or come to understand it. And I think art has such a great way of being able to create a container in which we can begin to feel what we need to feel, learn what we need to learn, that can be really a lot more difficult to do when we're not kind of in that, when we're not tapping into art in some form.
They're able to capture just the raw essence of things, you know, whether that's good or bad. And I think, especially when you're feeling helpless around something like this, even getting a message out in whatever way you can is going to help you feel empowered.
Right.
And it does help, because I'm shocked sometimes when I talk to people and the things that they haven't heard about yet. And being able to get a message out is going to be cathartic. You know, you can get your feelings out into whatever you're working on and help inform other people. So, you know, I'm really trying to encourage people to channel this into art in some way, because art is activism.
Yeah, take some sort of action. And now is like a really great time too. I know there are a lot of organizations that are a lot more like, say, like ACLU and even like ourselves, where we're kind of more forward facing, but there are a lot of other kind of more grassrootsy ways of also kind of combating this or doing something about what is happening. So I think would be really encourage people to find those pathways that feel good to them and push through them, which could be through art, it could be online, it could be in person, it could be a lot at their work, it could be a lot of different places. And then I also wanted to invite people to the Transjoy Boise Cafe, which is just going to be a few days away from when this podcast comes out. So on January the 25th, we're going to be at the Unitarian Universalist Church. And it'll be the first of hopefully a monthly kind of opportunity for us to get together and do all the paperwork and stuff, because we've talked about that in previous podcasts, the importance of getting our paperwork, getting our shit in order, so to speak, getting our names changed, getting our gender markers, checking in with like around our adoptions and marriages and wills and, you know, last rites and, you know, like the medical stuff, you know, all that sort of stuff is important. So we're going to have that sort of stuff available. But then I think also we're planning on having these like circles. We're kind of, I think, I was playing with the idea of like affinity circles, but this idea of like having a social support opportunity to like break away and talk about like the grief with what's going on and do something with that, or the anger or the joy maybe even, or trying to tap into that joy, as well as opportunities to learn more about what's happening politically and how they can kind of get involved.
And we're working on setting up other groups or just opportunities to bring more trans and non-binary people together, maybe to learn stuff and just to, you know, be around people that are going through something similar, you know, whatever that may be. So
just don't be by yourself in all this. Like, find a way to connect with others.
I'm really looking forward to it. You know, we've been throwing around some ideas for different groups or activities to do, and I think that some of them are going to be really insightful, some of them are going to be really fun, you know, and I think at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters is that we're together. You know, that we have these opportunities to just be around each other and talk and kind of help each other get through this, because we are all so mad, you know, and hurting through all of this, because every day you have to look at the news of people talking about how your existence is inconvenient. So
so continue to keep an eye out for us. We're getting into the new year. We're planning on doing a survey to kind of figure out what it is that the community might need, as well as there's going to be opportunities to volunteer or get involved. So if you're looking for a channel, feel free to reach out to us and you know, offer to work with us or collaborate with us in something, or let us know something that you're doing that you would like for us to let people know about as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
That would be really fun.
Well, thank you so much, Pacey, for like going through some of this. I know there's so much more like of the nitty gritty to go through, but I think we did enough to kind of like begin to kind of give an idea.
I think so. It's a lot to take in such a short amount of time, but I know that I'm sure when I check my phone later tonight, there will be fucking something else to talk about.
And I do want to like I do want to shout out you particularly. So people are wanting to keep track of more of the political aspects and the activism and getting more information. Pacey Speaks on Instagram and TikTok is a really great way. You've been creating some really great content specifically around this stuff to kind of help educate people, and I think direct people in kind of how to deal with some of this stuff, or even regurgitating and spitting it out in a way that's a little bit more understandable for us who might not be as in the know of everything. So folks can check out Pacey Speaks as well. I think that's a really great place. We have some of this stuff on transjoyboise, but you definitely have a lot more happening over there. So if folks are interested in that sort of content, I'd encourage you to check out Pacey Speaks, as well as like Socialistically Awkward is a really great place to kind of keep in check with kind of like political issues on a broader spectrum, but
definitely.
Really great stuff.
No, I agree.
Awesome. Well, should we say goodbye?
Yeah, we should. Yeah, until next week.
All right. Bye-bye.
Are you gonna leave that recording?